for joining us today. So this is part of the first Friday series of the Open Science Working Group of the Global Young Academy. And one of our goals with this group is to raise awareness about different issues relating to open science, because awareness does seem to be one of the biggest barriers to uptake of open science practices. Today we are going to hear from Roland Bertelmann, who is the head of the Helmholtz Open Science Office. His main focus is on open research data, open access for scientific publications, open research software, and the corresponding incentives for the cultural shift to open science. He's been involved in open science for 20 years in various projects and roles. Among other roles, he is currently co-spokesperson of the initiative Digital Information of the Alliance of the German Science Organizations, is active on the board of the German German Initiative for the Network Information, and is a member of the working group Re3 Data. From 2000 to 2020, he was head of the Library of Information Services at the Helmholtz Center for German Research Center for Geosciences. So in addition to talking with us today about actually implementing open science at the Helmholtz, I was talking a little bit with Roland before everyone joined about just his view on the history of open science and how things have changed over time. And he's really been working in this field for a very long time. So I definitely recommend picking his brain, asking some questions at the end of his talk today. Thank you so much again for joining us, and Roland for sharing your expertise.
Yeah, and thanks, Tasha. And then I try to start my little talk, and thank you for inviting me. And just to change the title a bit, implementing open science in a research organization, seen from the example in Helmholtz, about which I can talk as I'm from Helmholtz, as Tasha introduced. And just want to give you a quick overlook what we are doing, what aspects we have in there. But maybe first 2 or 3 words on the Helmholtz Association. In Germany, we have, like in other countries, university research, and separated from this non-university research. And in Germany, we have 4 organizations there: Max Planck, Leibniz, Fraunhofer, and the Helmholtz Association. And in fact, Helmholtz is the largest research performing organization in Germany. And the mission is just research for the grand challenges in a way. And I think the most important point also in terms of open science is that Helmholtz has a profound expertise in large-scale research infrastructures. So we have all the centers in Helmholtz have large-scale infrastructures, and these infrastructures produce data, and they are also accessible for the scientific community from outside. That's maybe one important point, and don't want to go too much in detail here. But just to give you some numbers, nearly 44,000 employees, and just a reasonable part of this are, of course, young scientists. So interesting also for your academy in a way. And we talk of about nearly 6 billion euros per year, which are spent there from different sources. But if we go closer, so many people from outside don't know Helmholtz, because in fact, the research is done in 18 different centers, and these centers are legally autonomous and work under their own name in a way. And if you see this long list here, you just see many of the centers don't even have Helmholtz in the name. So it's Helmholtz is somehow the roof about over all these 18 centers. And just as an example, one member of Helmholtz is a German aerospace center, DLR, which is rather big and working a lot, for example, with NASA and ESA and on the same level. So it's, and suppose many people don't know that they are part of Helmholtz. And I think also if you talk about how we implement open science in Helmholtz, it's important to keep in mind that in fact we have to deal with 18 respective centers in a way. And the centers themselves are rather big. So for example, Jülich, they are working more than 5,000 colleagues. So it's rather large structures there. The research itself is organized over all these centers in 6 research fields. It's energy, earth and environment, health, aeronautics, space, transport, matter, and information. So see, it's natural sciences behind mostly, and in there, again, a very broad range. So again, if we talk about open science, we have very different research cultures behind there. So going into open science now in Helmholtz, if you look on the website of Helmholtz, you find values listed there, and you find their sustainability of research, good scientific practice, and open science. And I think that's great that Helmholtz shows itself with these 3 values, and open science is part of these values. And this means, in a way, if we talk about open science, we talk about good scientific practice, we talk about how science is done right and correct. So there are a lot of definitions for open science out. Probably you know, on the right-hand side, you see this graphic. The wonderful definitions from the UNESCO recommendations on open science. Here in Helmholtz, years before, we tried to define how we see open science, and I think that definition still works quite well, and it says it's all about cultural change. And I think that's the most important point there: cultural change of scientific working methods, change of organization, and change of scientific and scholarly communication. And this all is on the background that we have a digitization in science. All scientific methods are now influenced by digitization. And open science is a wonderful tool to apply this to all components of the scientific process: publications, research data, research software methods, and so on, to make this open, traceable, reusable, accessible to everyone. And this expands the transparency and the possibilities for quality assurance in science. And that's our claim in a way. This increases the performance in science and promotes innovations. I think that's really open science is in the heart of the scientific endeavor. But we should keep in mind, as I said, this is all done on the background of different research cultures. And in fact, in all these different research fields, we have, if you think about publication culture, something very diverse situations, and that we have to keep in mind if we talk about open science in Helmholtz. And this means looking closer there, and that's not only in Helmholtz, I think it's in every institution. If you really take open science, what it can be and for the future, it's just a cross-cutting topic, and it has numerous points of contact. In our Helmholtz situation, in the centers, because in the centers there are the scientists, the researchers, and this very on the work on desk in a way. And there it's issues on digitization, on research infrastructures, libraries, data centers, issues on transfer of scientific knowledge, citizen science, and many subjects more. But if we look in such a structure like Helmholtz, on the entire association, as I said, Helmholtz is some kind of a roof over these 18 centers. It's again the digital transformation, but it's another view on that. It's about KPIs. We have so-called incubator platforms in Helmholtz, and there is, for example, a platform which tries to foster the use of metadata in connection with research data. And that's, of course, also a subject of open science, and we work very closely together. Helmholtz has internally funding schemes. And again, it's important to have open science in there. And for example, if you talk about transfer of knowledge on the level of the association, then you are quickly connected to the ministries and things like this. So these are very different levels. And in all these levels, if you take open science as it is, you have a lot of cross-cutting topics to go in. Within Helmholtz science now, in the last year, we focused a bit, of course, on open access, on open research data, and in the last year, very much on open research software. And we try to bring this also, of course, into a national and international network and presenting here. So in my view, also bringing our issues into an international perspective. I won't go into detail with these milestones, but as I said, it's a long history. In a way, just in Germany, many of these discussions started with the Berlin Declaration on open access to knowledge in the sciences and humanities, 2003. And Helmholtz was with the first signatories there. And we quickly then started in Helmholtz Open Access Project, and on first hand talking at that time on open access. But already in 2012, we changed the language in a way to open science. As we said, at that time, we wanted to bring research data more into view, and later on, as I said, we integrated a lot of issues on research software. And I think for us, an important milestone was last year when the Helmholtz Open Science Policy got adopted, and I'll talk about that a bit later. As I said, open science must be done in the centers, there where the researchers are. Tasha introduced me as the head of the Helmholtz Open Science Office. And this is a small group in a way, but which works for all of Helmholtz. And our mission is in a way enabling open science practices in Helmholtz. It means we try to be a service provider for the whole association for that cultural change from closed to open. I think our most important task is really to promote dialogue and provide impulses within the association. And I'll show you some examples, and to offer information and support concerning all aspects of open science. So in a way, we try to spread the word. I think that's our job. And I highlighted this here. We cooperate with structures within the centers. We have, for example, an open science working group with representatives from all these 18 centers. And we have a lot of, just a number of task groups on certain issues with experts in there with colleagues from the respective centers. And we still see this point that we, with open science, deliver a key contribution to the digital transformation. And I think that's really a point. We are just at the starting. If you talk about ML, AI, I think openness has still a long way to go. So as an open science office, we try to focus our work a bit. And so for the next year, we have these 5 points out there. We want to foster incentives, indicators for the promotion of open science. We will bring forward open science publishing, and publishing not only means publishing texts, also publishing research data, research software. And just as you know, these discussions, now I think one of our main points for the upcoming year will be to foster scholar-led publishing in a way. Infrastructures are needed. Without infrastructures and opening infrastructures, the whole thing won't work. And for us, the most important point is also to, as I said, to work together with the colleagues in the centers who are there within these different subjects, with the libraries, with the colleagues who do research data, with the colleagues who try to foster research software, and bringing them together and advancing the whole thing on the level of the association. And recently we are more and more bringing reproducibility into the forefront, as reproducibility, working on reproducibility can be a perfect way forward also to integrate open science in daily scientific work. So as an example, we do a lot of open science fora, where we bring together these different stakeholders from these 18 centers, from these also different worlds we have in the centers. I think you all know this from your own organization or institutions. Often libraries don't talk to the colleagues who do research data and so on. And I think one of our tasks is also to bring all these colleagues with all their expertise together to advance then the whole open science issue. And if you just look through this list, you find again all the subjects I indicated already. And this is one of our main, I think, outreach possibilities on the level of an association to bring colleagues together. Let's talk with each other. I think it's really important for scientists, colleagues from the infrastructures, and also with the colleagues, for example, from the head structures of the organizations. So as I said, the main milestone for us was the adoption of the open science policy. We had already an open access policy. The centers have research data policies. I'll show this afterwards. But in this open science policy, we brought together all these aspects, and there are 3 sections in there. And I think the first one is, of course, important because it gives a vision. It's a strategic positioning of Helmholtz, and it was really adopted by the heads of all these 18 centers. So it's some kind of, yes, we want to do this, but we all know there are steps to do. And we follow, if we talk on research data, this principle as open as possible, as closed as necessary. We need these discussions, of course. And then we have a section there about monitoring issues. So for example, we are monitoring how many open access publications we have. We are monitoring the development of research data policies, things like this. And we have a 3rd section in there with recommendations in a way for implementation of open science issues. These are in line with the funding policy of the European Commission. So for you who are from Europe, you know that the Commission is also pushing open science in a way. And we tried to align the Helmholtz policy there with the European approach. I think that's important also, because you as a researcher don't want to follow 3 or 4 or 5 different rules. It should be one rule you follow in your institutions, or when you follow for a grant or something like this. Okay, and for the strategic positioning, I think these principles are no surprise. It's about openness, it's about transparency, it's about quality assurance, and about cross-linking, bringing subjects together. And there, I think, just to mention this, it's of course really important to integrate, if we want to do, for example, fair standards for metadata and persistent identifiers, because that's the clue which brings all things together. And we have some design principles here again and again support it. So Helmholtz will support researchers in implementing this policy by providing infrastructure, services, consultancy, and training. And as I said, this was signed by the directors of these 18 centers. Still, if you look into centers, we are often not there, but the vision is written there. And I think to make it easy for scientific work, we need these infrastructures, and these infrastructures must be developed, and it's also written here. And we need funding for this to support your work, your scientific work, when you try to do things open. Okay, and we brought also in this policy this idea of openness by design. So saying on this way in this transition from closed to open, the aim is in the end that openness is the leading vision in there, and with all following steps. We are not there, but the vision is there, and we try to summarize in the policy this vision with this term openness by design. So in a way, in a future, building all these components together into some kind of a digital research ecosystem, which is open and which supports open scientific work. And as it's written there, these are socio-technical structures. And I think that's really an important point. It's, if you talk about infrastructures, on first hand, we think on it's a technical point to build infrastructures, to have a software, to have but I think the really important point behind is it's really, again, the cultural change. Because infrastructures won't work if they are not built for the cultural change, and they will not be used if they are not built with your requests as researchers. And as in Helmholtz Open Science Office, we try to bring this also forward by cooperating with a lot of partners in third-party funded projects. And just take one out of here, we have led the implementation of ORCID as a persistent identifier for researchers in Germany in the last years, and it's now this project has come now to an end last year, and we are now building a project, building a PID network for Germany. And so such ways of going for third-party funds is, of course, bring money in on the one hand, like in every time when you try to get a grant. But on the other hand, it gives us the possibility to integrate with other players in Germany on the home subject. And we try to do this not only on a national level, but also on international level. And so in terms of research data, for example, the RDA is for us an important partner. But we are also strongly supporting since year RDA in Germany. And there is, for example, a yearly meeting on RDA in Germany. And we are co-hosting this since the beginning. So this to give you an idea what kind of work we are doing here. So I've now some details about the subjects. Go quickly through this. Mostly I said this, it was open access. We had already a policy in 2016. And we integrated then this in this open science policy. And this means we are monitoring the progress, and for open access, we take also green open access into account. So we can only measure some back years and not the last year. But you see from all journal publications we have in Helmholtz, now 81% are open. I think it was a growing development, but we all expect that the last 20% will be a bit more complicated. And as I said, just to show you an example, we integrated this into the open science policy. And so there, for example, just stressing that CC BY as a license is our standard. And if you look out to all the large publishers, they all, when they offer you open science publishing or open access publishing, and some of them want to push you into more closed licenses. So it's important to have in a policy just a clear statement. If you're working at Helmholtz, if you're publishing open access, then CC BY is our standard. And I think these things are helping, because then if you're there signing some kind of thing with a publisher, you can then go back and say, okay, Helmholtz expects me to do this. And just to give you some, I won't go into detail here, there are a lot of issues in open access we are in. I think it's really important that we still think that green open access is a possibility in all these cases where we can do immediately green. But of course, we are supporting also transformative contracts. For example, in Germany, we have this whole issue on deal, having contracts with 3 big publishers on a national level. But Helmholtz colleagues are engaged, for example, in archive. Some centers are really contributing financially to archive, so that archive can be an infrastructure for the scene. Or colleagues in Jülich have built a national open access monitor. So there is really a broad discussion on open access in the whole association. And as I said in the beginning, we try to foster this with some task groups, and having in these task groups, again, colleagues from the respective centers, practitioners in a way, and discussing things forward and bringing them discussions. We prepared with them in the task groups on the level of the whole association. For example, we had such a forum recently on scholar-led publishing, and this was prepared together with these colleagues in this open access transformation task group. On research data, can talk a lot on research data, and that's really a broad field. We talk about open research data, and as you all know, FAIR itself, it's not includes not directly open, so open is an additional point. And there we took another approach. With an open access policy in 2016, we said, okay, there is possible to have a policy on the level of the whole association. For research data, we thought it's much better to have policies on the level of the respective centers. Because if we talk about research data, this is much more nearer, closer to the different research fields. And so then it makes more sense to have a policy on that level. And again, we integrated this into, on let's say, overall level, into the open science policy. And you find there's a sentence, again, a digital research data that the centers generate shall be managed responsibly and in accordance with FAIR principles. And of course, if we look in the daily work, we see a lot of work which is still to be done until we really have a fair coming in really into life. But I think it's important to have this now on a policy level, as really it's policy of Helmholtz to go in that direction. As I said, openness by design, bringing this forward in a way. And as an example, Sasha introduced me also as a member of the working group for RIS3 data. If you don't know RIS3 data, I would like to hint you on that. That's the largest global infrastructure where we can find information on research data repositories. So it's a registry of research data repositories. And together with colleagues from the US, we've founded this 10 years ago. And if you don't know RIS3 data, just have a look on. Yes. But in Germany at the moment, if we talk about the research data, it's important, an important discussion that we have a funding for a so-called national research data infrastructure. And again, all Helmholtz centers are member of this national infrastructures. And there are respective consortia on diverse research fields. Earth, health, microbiota, biota, energy, whatever. And again, one of our roles is to bring openness aspects in this discussion and to interconnect the colleagues who are working there in centers connected to this national infrastructure. And same thing is on a European level. The NFDI, this National Research Data Infrastructure, is seen as a German contribution to the European Open Science Cloud. And if you look into the respective centers, you see that these centers are engaged in a lot of ongoing projects on the EOSC level. And then again, bringing this discussion back and making it fruitful for the whole association. That is, for example, one of our roles here in this Helmholtz Open Science Office. And there again, we have a task group for the implementation and to follow up this implementation of research data policies. And just want to step further if we talk about research software. As I said, we began years ago to build the discussion about open research software. Open licenses are widely used, but for example, in terms of getting incentives for working with research software, it's a long way to go. And so we built model policies, built checklists to bring such things forward in the centers. That's again the whole discussion about in an organization with 44,000 colleagues working there. You always need to have the discussion going up and down from the top level down to the bottom and back again. And also again, we integrated some points on research software in our open science policy. And we are working here together with colleagues in Helmholtz, for example, in a current project highlighting Helmholtz research software. And so bringing it more into global attention, and the colleagues working there also getting their backs then. And this brings me to our most important point, and it's really also a cross-cutting point. Now we are talking a lot about indicators, course, all research is measured in a way, and how can we integrate indicators in all these measure systems to incentivize open science. And so in the whole discussion about research evaluation, I think that's a really hard way to go, but as I see at the moment, there's really also a global movement to see the need to do this. So again, there we have a task group, and this, I think it's interesting because we try to integrate so-called quality indicators for research data and software products into the Helmholtz internal measuring system, and not just counting data publication or something, whatever it would be, but to indicate then to build quality indicators. We are on the way, have not yet a solution there, but I'm looking just forward for next year that we can then publish what we have done, and maybe also to contribute to the global discussion in that direction. Okay, and so just coming to the end, we have a website, we have a newsletter you can subscribe to. It's open. Of course, we are using a whole range of social media if you want to follow us. Almost internally, we have mailing lists, MetaMost, things like this. And it's just a team of 10 people here. And so let's keep in touch. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I think Twitter is now X, so you're going to have to update.
Oh, that's it. It should stay Twitter.
Yeah, thank you so much for that, Roland. It was interesting to hear about how much power it does have to have those things written down and be able to point to them and say, you know, when people are publishing or something, this is what Helmholtz expects of us. So that kind of gives you that leveraging power. It looks like we already have a question, so I'm gonna go ahead and let Mohammed ask his question.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. This was great. So my name is Mohammed. I'm one of the new members. I joined the GYA this year, and I'm based in Chicago at Northwestern University. Mm-hmm. I think this is very interesting, and I would like to have like a follow-up conversation with you about some of these initiatives. One thing that is kind of turning in my head is around the components of openness, and whether openness also extends in your case, whether it extends to, for instance, openness of grant proposals or openness of evaluation processes and tenure decisions. I think what we see a lot of the times is that openness is kind of exclusively discussed within the debate about publications, like journal publications, like peer-reviewed publications. They should be published openly, or there should be an open version of them available, whether it's the version before, like the accepted version. Sometimes you can publish that. You can publish a preprint. There's all versions of it, but there's rarely discussions about, okay, like you got this grant proposal. You got this funding. Where is the proposal? Where is your proposal? How can I see what did you promise for which you received like millions of euros of funding? And the other one is around decisions about tenure and promotion. Like many universities don't openly share the decisions, or the process is not always very clear. And I was wondering whether you have any sort of regulations or any workflows around some of these other aspects of openness that are not necessarily about peer-reviewed publications.
broad discussion. Maybe 2 points. On first hand, as I tried to show that we are focusing on these, let's say, research products in a way at the moment, and definitely one product is text publication, but in our view, it's also research data, research software, and that's, as I said, we try now to integrate in an internal promotion system, and we are on a good way there, let's say, with these quality indicators. And just expanding the idea of not only talking about paper publications, talking about research products, I think it's an important step, and I would say we have done this already in Helmholtz. And for example, in Europe, just recently, there are these ERC grants. They have also opened now their evaluation systems for grant proposals, and asking not only for bibliographical information on papers, but they are also asking on research products which you have done. That's maybe a small answer for the first part of the question. And of course, the whole discussion, as I said, if we talk about openness, it's about good scientific practice. And you can add a lot of more subjects in. We could talk about open methods, and as you asked, open grants, things like this, open proposals. At the moment, we are not focusing on this, but of course, all these discussions show up. So for Helmholtz, I must say, at the moment, this is not a discussion, but we see it. So for example, we just recently talked about open hardware, things like this. There are a lot of subjects which can come up. But at the moment, I would be happy if we get things forward with these 3 key research products in a way, but not losing out of sight that the world is much more broader. And in all these points, how scientists are evaluated, at the end, I just indicated that for us, it's really a key point talking about indicators and bringing openness-related indicators in all discussions we have in Helmholtz on all levels. And so that would be my question at that, or my answer to that question. And of course, what I see is that we have at the moment really a growing global discussion on this subject. And I look forward how this discussion develops. Let me put it that way.
Thank you so much, Roland and Mohammed, for engaging. Martin, looks like you have a question next.
Yep. Hello, I'm Martin Dominic. I'm at the University of St Andrews in Scotland, and
Just
a lot of the things that you said reminded me of discussions that we had at my university within our open research working group. And something that we see is, we have some people in library and information services who are extremely knowledgeable on this topic, who are doing a great job. They're facing the problem that it's very difficult for them to get heard by academics within the university, who are the ones who take the decisions.
Yeah.
And in particular, if you look at how researchers deal with this, the vast majority of researchers have very little understanding of what it is that we're talking about and why we are talking about this.
Yeah.
So I was wondering, how much buy-in do you have from researchers on what you're doing?
It depends, I would say. So what you try to do is really to integrate, for example, researchers in these discussions in this fora, for example, and bring those different views in. And maybe, let me put it that way, for researchers, I think for me the point is their infrastructure. And if this infrastructure is working, whether you call it open or not, it will help researchers with their daily work. And I think that's the important point to go for. And that's, for example, as I said, as Helmholtz is a large organization, we need all these contacts within the centers, and we need to build, and we have this already in some of the centers, structures where all these issues are pushed forward and are integrated in, they are beginning to integrate it in the whole range, for example, of also their decision trees they have in the centers. And you must not call it open, but if the result is openness, it would help. Careful answer. But you're correct. I think that's really, we have this gap. I think we all have this gap. And but we really need also in Helmholtz to bring all these levels together. For example, what we do as Helmholtz Open Science Office on an overarching level with the colleagues working at a how to call it on a baseline in the centers and their contacts with the researchers. So in organizations with 44,000 colleagues working in, we, for example, as this Helmholtz Open Science Office, can't contact directly every scientist. So this must be done really on a center level. And there again, as the centers are rather large, you must go down in the end into the working groups. You must, I always like to say, you must get the PIs. If you have the mind of the PIs, the story will work.
Martin, did you have?
Yeah, you're not content.
No, I have another suggestion, and this really cuts across three of the keywords that you mentioned, and those are infrastructure, research products, and culture change.
Yeah,
and something that I'm trying over the last years is I've started avoiding the term publishing in favor of talking about communication. Because whenever people talk about publishing, it just carries a lot of ballast of some cultural thinking that is no longer up to date.
Yeah.
And you talked about infrastructures that you're building. And I think we can seriously ask ourselves the question of what do we need people like Elsevier for? Given that, if we use the word publish, we can now publish by putting things on the internet, and it's there and it's accessible. And the traditional role of publishing companies has just disappeared because we're operating in different structures. Once you get this kind of concept, just by avoiding the word, you really drive the culture in a different direction.
That's why.
And I tried by always stressing communication. And you want to communicate. Communication is essential for science. And then you're there. And I just avoid the word publishing that comes from, you have to have this article that's submitted to that journal. And, we can build much better infrastructures.
Two answers. That's the reason why we are using the term research products. So I think that's the point, because it's all products which come from research. And the other point is, yes, we have, of course, we have this discussion not only on Scala-led publishing, but also on Scala-led infrastructures, let me put it that way. But I think we must be realistic, especially when we talk to young scientists, because their careers at the moment are built on another system, and we can't advise them. Well, they should be aware how the system works. Let me put it that way.
Are you signed up to Quora?
I was in a core group which created Quora, but Helmholtz has an association at the moment, didn't sign Quora. But I was in a core group writing the text.
Thank you so much, Martin. I know Martin and I also have had discussions before about the importance of culture versus incentives. And I do think, yeah, the incentives part is also really important for getting people on board for better or worse. And it sounds like you are doing a lot of that. I'd be interested in hearing a little bit more about what indicators. I know you said that you use these in open science kind of indicators in evaluation at Helmholtz, but what are those indicators? So how do you actually use that to assess candidates or promotion or things like that when at Helmholtz?
How can I keep the answers short? Anyway, I think years ago, the first point, of course, talking about publication, then it was that open access publications were integrated in this paper counting, and it has changed a lot. And it's really now, since years now, integrated in a normal system. And this, of course, helps, because it's not something, oh, I want to do this, but something like this. And maybe it's two short words on this quality indicators we try to build at the moment on research data and research software. So it's already decided that research data and research software will be integrated in the Helmholtz internal measuring system, measuring progress of the centers. That's important on the level of the centers, but then it works down in a way to respective desks. And idea there is, again, not just to count one indicator, not to count numbers, for example, but to bring in a broader view and build a model how we can integrate then again such a broader view into something like, let me say, a number which can be integrated in internal assessment systems. So let's see. And of course we are talking this, also looking at what colleagues now on EOSC level are doing their working groups and things like that. And I think let's see where we come out. We're just in a process there. Let me put it there.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, well, I'm also coming from, so I'm a professor at a teaching college, and it does seem like it is the same group of people who wind up doing these things over and over again, and it takes a lot of time, and so I'm just curious to see how you kind of incentivize to broaden that net, but I also don't want to dominate the conversation.
I think it's always you have to look on the structure of the organization and what are the tools in the organization and how can you change the tools, I think. And so maybe in detail then it differs from institution to institution, but I think the overall approach should be nearly the same everywhere.
I want to see if anyone, we have a couple more minutes, has a final question for Roland. That was really a fascinating talk. I appreciate the kind of historical perspective you can bring to of how Helmholtz has changed their approach over time. All right. Well, I think it looks like we're good. Thank you so much again for joining us. And
thank you for inviting me.
Huh? Oh, yes, of course. And thank you everyone for attending. Again, our next event will be on September 1st, the same